There's different influxes of energy throughout the year. So there's a first half of the year and a second half of the year, and then there is the wind element of spring, the fire element of summer, the dampness in later summer, dryness, coldness comes in winter, and so on.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological. The other day, a patient shared with me how she's noticed that her mind is always ordering her around. It's never satisfied, never says good job and thanks. It's even disgruntled when she does what the mind just told her to do. It's a petty tyrant that rarely allows for a moment of satisfaction. Sound familiar? She's not alone in this, is she? This is commonly called monkey mind, but it's not fair to point the finger at monkeys. What we're talking about is having a human mind. Perhaps best to own it, uncomfortable as that might be, because then we might have the opportunity to do something about it. Perhaps it is simply the nature of the human mind to be disgruntled, unhappy with the current circumstances, and that is the fuel that drives us to create, to bring about change, to, as Stephen Jobs would say, make a dent in the universe. It's not the contented folks that invent things. It's not the people happy with the status quo that push for social change. Those happy with the moment are not scribbling up the books that you might like to read, designing structures that are energy efficient and an inspiration to live in, or mixing paint and imagination in ways that allow you to glimpse something of the depth of the human heart. I overheard a young couple recently complain that, air quotes here, adulting is hard, and, as is so often the case, marveled at our curious human capacity to play with language in such creative and interesting ways. For some reason, overhearing that portion of their conversation got me to thinking about the popular phrase, which was the title of a book back in, I think it was the 80s, Chop wood, carry water. Supposedly, this is a reference to some Zen phrase about before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, and after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, meaning enlightenment has very little to do with the day-to-day activities of being a human. There's email to respond to, children to raise, electric bills to be paid, and our 工作, our work in the world that needs to be done, the daily grind, the chop wood, carry water, that is both our burden and our privilege. You could come down on the side of, I have to work and be unhappy about that, or on the side of, I get to work and be thankful for the opportunity to discover how your unique talents and interests can be developed into something that creates value for others. Chop wood, carry water. It's a wonderful and terrible opportunity to discover how to take latent capacity and hone it into something that we can share with others in a beneficial way. Perhaps that petty tyrant that runs the storyline of our lives could be more than a source of suffering. Perhaps it's also the internal activist urging us to be better, or maybe it's the disruptive entrepreneur who has us innovating our way out of the constraints of our past solutions. The daily grind of living between heaven and earth, between inspiration and perspiration, between ideal image and the reality of the present moment. It's no easy matter, as you probably already noticed. Somehow, I find it oddly helpful overhearing that young couple's complaint about adulting, and remember that whatever version of chopping wood, carrying water is ours to do, it's worth embracing. And that having a profession that helps others is a real resource in changing times. And as my patient pointed out with her critical mind, it's helpful to pause from time to time and say thank you to ourselves and recognize what we've accomplished before picking up the bucket again as we head over to the well. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AccuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit AccuFastNeedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
I don't know about you, but it seems I'm constantly trying to nail down some structure and stability in this ever-changing stream of life. I used to think that a more thorough understanding of yin and yang would help me find more balance and contentment, but curiously, the deeper I look, the more instability I see as life dances between the polarities inherent in this world that we all share. It's no joke that we live in the world of uncountable things, but there are cycles, and the cycle of 60, which includes the cycles of 5 and 12, as we see in the 5 of the phases and the 12 of the channels, gives us a map for grasping the great tidal flows in which we live. This conversation with Gregory Done was recorded just as we were coming up to the crest of summer in mid-June. Gregory and I spoke earlier in the year about Polestar Astrology. He's got a blog which is certainly worth a read. You can Find it over on the show notes page. In this blog, he looks at the influences of the year and considers how they might unfold into the world of time and circumstances. We check in with Gregory here at mid-year as the more yin aspects of the annual cycle begin to arise and look at the opportunities and the challenges for each of the animals of the Chinese Zodiac in the coming 6 months. You really can't nail anything down in this ever-changing world, but it is helpful to at least know the weather forecast so you know how to set your sails. Let's get into this. Gregory Done, welcome back to Geological.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me back. Happy to be here.
I am happy to have you here. We spoke earlier in the year. We were talking about Polestar Astrology. We were talking about the influence of the Yang Water Tiger year. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, no wonder it's been so wacky this year then. Okay, Yang Tiger Water year.
Yes.
All of a sudden, I've got images of rivers at flood stage and white water and waterfalls and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, Yang Tiger Water year. And here kind of at mid-year. Midpoint of anything's often a good time to check in with things. And especially as I understand it, let me make sure I've got this right. With the Polestar Astrology, there's influences at the beginning of the year, and then about mid-year it shifts. And as I recall, it has something to do with stems and branches. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Chinese astrology is actually kind of a mess. It's a hodgepodge of a lot of different systems put together. If you study the Chinese calendar, you see that there's all kinds of different influences and all kinds of factors happening all of the time. And the system that I practice and what I do, I consider to be a kind of synthesis of all of them through the lens, though, of natal astrology, looking at how your own character and fate, as we discussed last time, interacts with the chi of the year. And when we kind of zoom out and look at the calendar and look at all these different factors happening at the same time, it's kind of hard to distinguish what is what and to make sense of the calendar. So there's different systems. There's the stems and branches, and there's something called a Wu Yun Liu Qi, and there's a questionable understanding of how these interact and what they are and how they're influencing human life. So Wu Yun Liu Qi is said to be something more related to the weather and something a little bit more medical, for lack of a better word, a little bit more influencing of the chi factors as we experience them through our human embodiment. And that system breaks the year down into this 6 seasons, and it breaks the year down into 2 different segments. And then there's different influxes of energy throughout the year. So there's a first half of the year and a second half of the year. And then there is the wind element of spring, the fire element of summer, dampness in later summer, dryness, coldness comes in winter, and so on. And then this all interacts, yeah.
Right, which in turn becomes our 6 levels, basically, right? Taiyang and Shaoyang and all that, and those particular influences.
Yeah, so those then interact with the overarching energy of the year, and then so to interpret that is quite complex and more medically relevant, perhaps. So looking, especially as practitioners of Chinese medicine, looking at how those things influence our physical well-being as well as our mental well-being, and as also the chi of the environment. So in ancient times, it was certainly used to predict natural occurrences. But the stems and branches, from my point of view, is a little bit different than that. So of all the different influences happening, the cycle of 60, which is 60 years, 60 months, 60 days, 60 hours, 60 seconds. This comes from Jupiter, and we understand it through these 2 factors, the stem, heavenly stem, earthly branch, right? And when we're talking about the chi of the year, when we say the Yang Water Tiger year, this is one of the earthly branches, right? And then that is primarily symbolic, as I understand it. So to understand, in the way that I work with the interpretation of the symbol is kind of a playful interpretation of the depth of the symbol and how the symbol manifests on Earth. So the stems are a little bit more, so we call them the heavenly stems, right? So that means that if they're operating from this kind of place that we call heaven, wherever that is, my teacher called it the spiritual vertical, but it manifests on earth through its branches, and it does so in this kind of symbolic way, at least in how we are able to understand it and interpret it. Because we're talking about a kind of living presence, how the energy of heaven is influencing and manifesting here on earth. And what it is, I don't really know. There's astronomically, perhaps it comes from the cycle of Jupiter, but observation over many thousands of years able to determine different patterns in this cycle, and then eventually broke them down into this set of 12, right? So Jupiter divides the sky into 12 houses, and these 12, how they manifest it is been interpreted through these animals, right? So why animals, and what do the animals have to say? What does it mean for the year to come in the form of a tiger?
Yes. Well, I mean, you were just talking about symbol.
Yes.
We have these influences that come to us. We have symbol. Symbol shows up in so many places in the human endeavor, right? We've got mythology. We've got different artwork, symbols that have come down to us through different cultures, often very similar, interestingly enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there is some kind of influence that comes in through our human consciousness, and regardless of where you are and what culture, there are some things that they're repeatable. They kind of show up the same. And symbol is such a powerful way of looking into something, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is where religion, I guess you could say, goes off the track, or where maybe we as humans take it off the track, right? There's these influences, symbols, these larger concepts, and when we try to nail it down to this equals that often doesn't help so much. But when we take it as an inquiry, when we take it as something to chew on, or see how it might unfold, or notice how it unfolds in the cycles of 60, like you were saying, 60 years, 60 months, 60 seconds, 120 for that matter, 60 times 2, right? Because you got your yin and your yang.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about wheels within wheels and then go spinning through time. It does get complex. But yes, symbols are a really curious way of exploring the human psyche.
For sure. And Heiner Fruhoff, one of my main teachers, definitely described Chinese medicine and the Chinese tradition as a symbol science, and as a associative thinking. I mean, associative learning, it allows us to be very kind of playful and gentle with the way that we approach our experience. Because if you understand a symbol, you understand what it's associated with, then this kind of allows us to play with those associations and contemplate them in our experience. And to me, that's what astrology is for. It's not fortune telling. It's not trying to predict anything that's going to happen. It's a contemplative act in which you understand and you study these symbols and how they inform our experience. And there's a lot of them. Every system has its own set of symbols.
Yeah, it's got its own pattern language.
Because we can't really get at reality directly, as the conceptual mind can't really, it's not precise. So we kind of use these symbols to approximate something that's beyond our understanding.
Man, that's so true, isn't it? We can't really get at reality.
Not directly.
Not directly. We can sort of pick up its influences.
Yeah, it's too big. And it's not in the form of human thought. It doesn't come that way. We'd like to wish that it did. But the human-centric view is not the Chinese view at all. Like, I think they thought that we were just one type of being among lots of different types of beings in sharing this kind of space. But symbols allow us to relax a little bit, not trying to figure everything out, to hold things a little bit more openly. And yes or no answers as well. It's much more relaxed.
I love this idea, Gregory, of playful and gentle. Because reality can be a real bitch. Reality, at some point, it'll kill us. It brings us all kinds of troubles. It brings us all kinds of great things as well. Love and connection and nice dinners, but it brings us a lot of trouble as well. And so often it seems in our human endeavor, trying to wrangle this thing into some kind of order and exert some kind of control over it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's slippery, right? It's like the more control you try to exert, the less control you have.
Yeah.
So this perspective of being gentle and playful and taking this symbol and recognizing that the universe doesn't speak in human thought.
Yes.
It's up to us to lighten up a bit, maybe soften up a bit to be able to receive more of these influences that are not otherwise in our mind.
Yes, yeah. And something like Chinese astrology, which is just a series of symbols, just offers us a symbolic lens through which to look at our experience. So if you think that all these factors are happening all the time, so we're in the water tiger year and in a fire horse month, what might that mean? And to not hold it, again, strongly, but to just live our lives, but then take a step back, a kind of a bird's eye view, and look at everything that's happening, and then relate it back to these symbols and just to ask the question, what is this influence? And how does it affect me? How is it affecting community? How is it affecting the world at large? And just to contemplate it. And it's a really rich experience. This has been kind of a big part of my path, just looking at the events of my life as they unfold and thinking, wow, like that was what's going on? This has been a crazy year so far.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what is up with this, for example, feeling pent up and frustrated? So that's something that's really available.
Yes.
In the first half of the water tiger year. So when we get into the tiger symbol and look at everything available in that symbol, might start to see patterns in our life that have been going on, or patterns in politics, or patterns at our job or something like that, and say, wow, maybe what's going on? And I think there's some kind of wisdom that comes from that, again, part of it's the softening, and part of it is just a rethinking of what we are and what time is and where we find ourselves in the universe,
Rethinking what time is and what we are.
Yeah.
Those are big questions. So in this year, Yang Water Tiger.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking earlier that there's two influences. There's the influence at the beginning. There's the influence toward the end. Restate for us what these two influences are so people can think about this in the way that we've just been speaking of, in terms of playfulness and some creativity and a bit of gentleness. Like, how do these images resonate? So the image at the beginning, right? We got the water tiger.
Mm-hmm.
What else is going on in that first part of the year? And then what else is going on in that second part of the year?
So some would assume that the audience here is informed on Chinese medicine to some degree.
Pretty much, yeah. It's, unless you're geeky about Chinese medicine, you're probably not listening to this.
Yeah. So in terms of the two, so the overarching thing, so first off, like in terms of the Wu Yun Liu Qi, the 5 movements in the 6
climates, yeah.
Qi factors, right? 6 climates. The overall theme of the whole year in terms of that is excess wind. And then we have to back up. So there's actually a lot of going on here in order to interpret and understand it. So we know that the overarching elemental theme of the year comes in the form, in terms of the stems and branches from the water tiger, is yang wood and yang water. And those, because all tigers by nature are yang wood. And we can kind of back up and say more about that. But then it is a yang water year as well. And that, of course, is the generative cycle, which kind of empowers and strengthens that water element. And you have to think that it's yang water, which is the very active and dynamic form of waters. And when it's got the power, the generative force of wood and wind behind it, it conjures up things like hurricanes, tsunamis, overflowing rivers, and so on. Then add that influence of the Yun Liu Qi, the overall pattern of the year being excess wind. That's a lot of wind. That's a lot of force, a lot of movement behind that water.
Big nature.
Yeah, so it's a very powerful kind of gale force. But then when you break it down into the two halves of the year, the first half is Shaoyang, ministerial fire. And this is somewhat in the form of what I would say the constrained heat.
Mm.
So it's like in the second half of the year, we get a second influence of wind again. Jui and windwood, right? So it's like there's this kind of triple factor of wind. But then in the first half of the year, it's kind of constrained and ideally circulating interiorly as ministerial fire. But the tiger as well has this kind of striped factor. So when we talk about the symbols of the tiger and what's important to understand about them, the first one is that the tiger is striped. So it has this kind of alternating quality, kind of a dark stripe and a light stripe. And there's this tendency, if you watch a cat hunting, they move very still, approach very, very slowly, and all of a sudden they explode and they run forward and pounce on what they're hunting. And that kind of energy, so it's like that, there's a kind of buildup of energy, and then that gets kind of unleashed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the image, what I see in terms of the two factors of the year. We have this kind of very, very strong buildup, this kind of really big intensity, this kind of internal pressure that happens when we get this factor of constrained heat internally. It's like a buildup of pressure. And we can talk about medically what that means, but that comes in the form of the tigers. And then we talk about the emotions associated with the tiger and what tigers are like in terms of the character of the tiger. We see that those kind of emotional patterns are more available. And what does all that mean? Hard to say, but we're kind of right there in the middle, somewhere that turning point is going to happen, that kind of second influx of wind after this kind of first half of the year of being ministerial fire.
So we've had the Xiaoyang in the first part of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll have the Zhueyin wood wind in the second part of the year. Now, I've been giving some thought to this kind of stuff, mostly through the lens of Sa'am acupuncture, which I've been studying and practicing a bit because it talks about this. So I want to bring this in and see how this fits.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of Xiaoyang fire, I think of gallbladders.
Yes.
And I think of that yang wood that rises up and out. And if it doesn't get to rise up and out, that's where you get your anger, you get your frustration, you get your acting out.
Yes.
You bump up against barriers and you blow them the hell down, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very tiger.
Very tiger, very outward tiger. And it's an outward energy. And it doesn't like being constrained.
Yes.
Right? Something gets in the way, it's like, okay, boom, blow that up. Now, Zhueyin, this is an inward energy, right? It's the deepest part of the human body. And when I think of Zhueyin, I think of a deep, dark forest.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of some stillness in there. I mean, there's wind that goes through the forest. It's not the wind of a hurricane, but it's like the breeze and breathing that you hear of the trees. Zhueyin to me seems quieter because it's yin. It's not yang.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how that resonates with what you're thinking and might be seeing in the second part of this year.
Yeah, I think you're describing the ideal, the healthy version of it. So hopefully that is what happens. So I think, hinting more at perhaps the pathological expression of it or the potential for that. Maybe it's just the medical part of me looking at more like what might happen if it went wrong. But that's more, I think, the positive side of it, that because joy in its healthiest form is that really deep internal kind of rest.
Mm-hmm.
The smooth flow and the smooth circulation of the wind energy. And the first half of the year too, which in general, first half of the year is yang, second half of the year is yin, fall and winter. So theory more internalized and more restful, hopefully. So the question then is, has that been happening? And is that happening? So it's always, of course, by level of magnification. So in your own life, if the first half of the year been able to actually use this ministerial fire, not have it be constrained, not get pent up, not get angry, not get frustrated. That's our vitality, our day-to-day energy. So it could have been a very productive first half of the year. But again, like you said, if that energy is constrained, if not, then it tends to build up and cause this kind of frustration and just knock things out of the way, trying to circulate.
Right.
And same with the wind. If this is restful, and if that wind is released and smooth through the blood, but the emotions are released by the pericardium, then it's restful, and that's actually sleep, right? That's deep turning inward, the reverting energy. But if that is not the case, then what is the nature of wind in the pathological sense? And is that happening as well? So in your own life, and then looking at the things going on in the world and asking that question, what is the wind flowing smoothly or is it chaotic?
Yes.
Because that's the other aspect of wind, is the kind of the chaotic movement of it. If it's not rooted, the blood is not rich in its nature, then the wind circulates chaotically and causes confusion. It causes erratic behavior and all that. So,
this episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Well, and one of the best ways to nourish your blood is get some rest.
yes.
So there's that. This is really interesting, Gregory, because I've looked at the first half of the year that I've lived here, and it's been really busy. It's been like, get to work, buckaroo.
Yeah.
And naturally, this is really fascinating to me, and hearing about that we're moving into this Dre-in period. It's like, holy smokes, this is lining up, because I've decided, I haven't had a vacation in a long time, and I decided that in the month of July, I'm taking a break from the podcast. I'm not recording any shows. I'm not putting anything new up. I'm not running any events. I'm taking July off. I got some great reruns coming up for the month of July, just like back in the summer when we were kids, depending on your age. There's going to be some reruns. There's going to be some cool stuff that you can rewatch. But the people producing the show, they're going to take a break. So month of July, I'm taking a break. Month of August, I'm going to do some travel and kind of wander, a little shao yao.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And so hearing that we're moving into this Dre-in period, I'm thinking, yep, it's exactly what I need. Without knowing any of this, it's exactly what I planned. So I'm kind of psyched to hear that. Again, looking at symbol, being playful with it. Height of summer, I want some ease and some yin, which is not a bad thing to do at that time, to create some balance. So
yeah,
I'm going to take my tiger out for a little vacation.
Yeah, I think this is a really good year for that. Like I said, so if you back up and look at the tiger symbol, this has this kind of alternating quality to it. So part of it is the pouncing forward, this incredible, unleashing of energy and hard work. But the other side is the tiger hides in the cave and disappears. And so this is part of the tiger character, is this kind of being in the world and being out of the world, wanting to connect, wanting to fully engage, but then also at the same time having to retreat.
Yes.
And to go hide in the cave and solitude. So tigers by nature, of course, solitary hunters. They roam alone, very large territories. And this is an important part of the symbol and an important part of understanding the dynamic of the year for sure, because it's got this in the world, out of the world, very engaged, but also very much seeking that rest and solitude. Because tigers have so much energy and there's so much power in it that if they don't have that alternating quality of rest, then they get very unhappy.
Well, this is kind of the nature of cats anyway. I mean, any of us that have cats,
yeah,
and we got a couple of them here, including an outdoor one that does pounce on little creatures and eats them.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to watch that in action. But even watching the house cats,
yeah,
they're very active at certain points. And then there's other times they go find a little shadowy, quiet place and they sleep.
yes.
And it's kind of on or off. I mean, on occasion, they're a little bit interactive and kind of chill. again, yeah, they're on or they're off.
Yeah, it's a feline energy. So like
It's a feline energy.
the symbols, again, they're loose, so imprecise in their nature, but more general categories that we kind of approximate with these animals. So they chose the tiger, but it's kind of like feline energy, or it's kind of like when you just watch a cat or watch a tiger or watch any of the big cats, they all have a certain kind of way of behaving.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it like if the whole year was like that energetically? And
Up and down, that's for sure.
yes, there's a lot of ups and downs, yeah.
Yeah, because cats are not always on by any stretch of the imagination. I'd like to shift just a little here. Again, we're at the mid-year. It's always a great, middle of anything's a great moment for contemplation, right? Just thinking about yin and yang.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everything we talk about in Chinese medicine is come back down to yin and yang. I'm curious to know your experience of this first part of the year and what ways it kind of matched up with what you've been thinking, and in what ways you've been surprised by the first 6 months of the Tiger year.
Yeah, I think it's not been as dramatic as I thought yet. This is kind of why I was looking at all these symbols and I was writing the blog and thinking about it. The two most important words that came to mind were kind of dramatic and unpredictable. And it's this kind of intensity again. And I have felt the intensity, but I've also been trying to some degree, stay off as much as I can, the overload from social media and the news feed and stuff like that. So I haven't quite been paying as close attention to what's been going on in the world, trying to stay informed, but there's a kind of unpredictable nature to the year. Part of it is that alternating quality of the stripes, and part of it is that just intensity of this power of the wind and the water together.
So you have consciously shielded yourself to some degree from that wild, chaotic wind of the Xiaoyang.
Trying to, but what my experience more is that it goes internally, or it has gone internally, at least for me, and I felt that kind of intensity inside while trying to avoid it in the external world. So I am a tiger too, so I'm like somewhat predisposed to these patterns and intensity of this year in the first half, like that kind of predisposition for that constraint, basically. That's what I've been experiencing and seeing a lot of in myself and patients that I've been seeing, and what I see a lot of constraint. That's kind of one of the main things that I'm seeing in people. Mm-hmm. But paired with this kind of intensity of trying to push forward, trying to hunt, basically. The tiger is looking for something, is a kind of primal energy, and it's a kind of somewhat possessed by this kind of hunger and this kind of a yearning.
So that really lines up in my mind with what I see going on in the world at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever hunger we have, people are kind of going after it, but at the same time not sure how they can get it because, yeah, there's all kinds of constraints. The economy right now has not been in such bad shape in 40 years. We've never seen such high gas prices. I don't want to get all political about this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to point out that there is a wildness to what's going on in our society right now.
Yeah.
That I don't think we've seen this for quite some time. I mean, those of us that are like 60 or older, we've been through like a whole cycle of everything. So we might have a flavor of some of it. But, for folks that are younger, this is like the first go around with something like inflation, for example.
Yeah.
Which I remember in the 80s when interest rates were at 18%. Holy Mother of God. I don't know how people bought houses back then. It was nuts. But we're starting to see things like that again. And so
yeah,
I think about what you're alluding to with the Xiaoyang fire, and I'm going to say hunger, right? Especially after COVID and lockdowns, there's been so much constraint that we've experienced. I'm seeing this in my clinic as people are coming out of that constraint. They are not sure how to orient themselves to what the world is right now.
Yeah.
And the world seems really confusing because it's a different world than it was 3 years ago.
Yeah. So my feeling, there's a kind of a waiting and a kind of building up is what I see still happening of something. So like the rising price is an example. I mean, that has only one place to go, and that's down. I mean, it can go up more. Hopefully it doesn't go up too much more. And that kind of alternating back and forth, up and down quality. So something like a dramatic crash economically would make sense in a year like this. And maybe that's going to happen. I don't know. But that's the nature of the energy of the year for sure. And there have been a lot of dramatic things that, of course, have happened that were made sense. So that's what has surprised me the most, I suppose, so far is, but the Ming used to say, things are going well, wait. If things are going badly, just wait.
Yes.
And that's very much this kind of year. So always in that kind of that transition, that kind of bardo of waiting to see what's going to happen and the kind of unpredictability of it.
Sure. I mean, that's just the nature of life here on this rock.
For sure.
And sometimes it's a bit calmer. You can have those nice, beautiful summer afternoons that are kind of cool, and there's a little bit of a breeze, and you can smell the scent of the flowers because it's just a slight breeze, and then there's the thunderstorms. But one thing for sure, it's always changing. It's just in what direction, at what speed. And I think so often, because we're humans and we're worried about survival, the question so often is, what does it mean for me?
Yes. This is the realm of astrology, so we're trying to understand our own natal astrology in relationship to the energy of the year, which is why it's hard to interpret, because there is no inherently good or bad, auspicious or inauspicious year. It's all relative to you.
Of course. And so, like, somebody born like me in a year where it's the great movement of wood, that would mean something different than someone who was born in a year where it's a great movement of earth or metal.
Yes.
Or something like that, right? It's why astrology can kind of fit sometimes, but it's like Chinese medicine. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Here's an influence, and how does that impact this kind of a constitution?
Yes, yeah.
Now you can start to get a handle on it.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you can get a handle on it. But simply, here's the outer influence. Well, okay. It's the weather, but that's going to affect you differently if you're 20 years old or if you're someone who's got a lot of dampness and you're 70.
Yeah, for sure.
So is it possible? This may take too long, or it may not even be relevant, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because we need context for everything that we do with East Asian medicine, and with Polestar for that matter, would it be possible to quickly, briefly, go through the different animals and what the second half of the year might hold in terms of opportunity or challenge?
For all 12?
Yeah, just like a little dim sum taster.
Challenging to do quickly.
It's a podcast. We can always take as much time as we need.
Yeah.
But the idea here is I'm not asking for something really in-depth, something that would be useful.
Yeah.
And again, in the symbolic realm that we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, something that will give each of us different critters something to chew on and reflect on playfully and gently in the next 6 months.
For sure. Well, it's important for us to know, everybody should hopefully know their own sign, and we have to remember that we each have 4 pillars: year, month, day, and hour. The year is primary, and in the tradition I learned the year and the hour are the most important, and the year is kind of like a noun, and the hour is kind of like an adjective. So you could be a piggy goat or an oxy rabbit or something like that.
I love it. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And so to some degree, you have to understand the nature of each of the characters, right? And again, so this is something I kind of wanted to say before getting into this. There's different forms of Chinese astrology, of course, and in Chinese medicine, of course, Batsa has become one of the main influences in the discussion of the stems and branches. And I'm somewhat more focused on the earthly branches. That's what interests me. The symbol of the animals. I just find them to be very rich and to be very fun to talk about. And like I said earlier, it's a loose and a playful thing. So if you remember, it's not like a clock. It's not precise. It's, again, associative. We're taking this symbol and we're playing with it.
I love it.
And so I don't find often in the discussion of Batsa, it's a little bit bit too mechanical sometimes for me. It's a little bit too precise. It's a little bit too trying to be scientific. And it's very focused on the elements, the elemental influences, which is important for sure. But to me, it's a $2 paperback on the 12 animals that you go in any store on Chinese astrology. What you're going to find is a book about the 12 animals, and it's very folky, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking about going to the Chinese restaurant, right? And it's right there in the placemat. And,
Yeah.
there was just something that you said, too. I want to get this before it pops out of my mind because it really got my attention.
Mm-hmm.
What I've always thought about was the phases and the critters. So, for example, I'm a fire rooster.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know people that are metal pigs and, wood tigers. But you were just talking about like piggy goats.
Yes.
So, okay, that's got my attention. Of course, the thing I love about Chinese medicine, we have all these different ways of looking through a lens that will bring something into focus. Maybe it will be helpful in helping us to help other people. So, could we go a little bit into piggy goats or dragony roosters or rabbity tigers? What's up here?
Well, yeah, understanding our own natal astrology, of course, like I said, the year is considered to be the deepest because it's the broadest influence happening relevant to human beings. There are larger influences happening astrologically, but that's considered to be the deepest one. And it's always been an odd idea that what is most general about you is the most important. So everybody born in the year of the rooster, for example, is obviously not the same person, obviously not the same, does not have the same personality, but we'd all say you have this same character. There's something that you share in common. Mm-hmm. Even though you could have a very diverse expression of personalities, there's some kind of behavioral pattern that you would have in common. But we each have, in theory, 4 pillars: year, month, day, and hour. So in one sense, you could say that your chi character is a synthesis of all of these, but they're not all equal in terms of what they influence. So in the tradition that I learned, the month and the hour are the most influential to what I call chi character, which is something like personality. So when I say, what is a rat like? What is an ox like? We talked about in the last podcast, our character and what influences character most strongly is these 2 factors. So there's a lot of things. When you look at a chart, there's 10, 20 different influences happening, but we zoom in on these 2, the year and the hour, as being the most important in determining basically our capacity. So Ming always used to talk about how life is how capacity meets opportunity.
Love it. It's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really true.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that also determines how our life goes. If you have a mismatch of that, that's problematic. So if you have a huge, powerful capacity, you're just talented and brilliant, and you have great vitality, and then you have no opportunity whatsoever to use any of that, then you're going to have an unhappy life. If you're not too bright, you're not that resourceful, and you're somewhat more gentle constitution, and you get forced into a position where you have to have all these demands put on you all the time, all these responsibilities to make all these decisions, and you're a leader or something like that, then that's not going to go very well either. So this is what we look at. Do those things match? And how is it going to go? Basically, what is your capacity, and to know what that capacity is. So this is what the 12 animals tell us to some degree. And the year is the most basic, deepest, broad kind of influence. And then the hour, which is something like the ascendant, is kind of more superficial. It's a little bit on the surface. And then these are a kind of a yin and yang pair. The month and the day, as I learned, and that the month and the day are what determine the batsa. These are a little bit more constitutional, a little bit more medically relevant, but in the tradition that I learned, not so influential on this chi character or personality display. So this personality display coming from the year and the hour primarily. And we want to kind of have a synthesis of the 2. So when you look at your year as the basis, and then you want to see that it's in a relationship with the character of the hour. So like I was born in a dragon hour, and I was born in the year of the tiger. It was pretty intense.
So you're a dragony tiger.
Dragony tiger, yeah. So the dragon is altering and modifying the image of the tiger, and they're in a relationship. And then you look at the elemental factors as well. So for me, it's a metal dragon and fire tiger, but it could be a water rat and a wood ox or something like that.
And the month comes into this as well, not just the hour, but the month comes in as well.
This is a question in astrology in different traditions, so in theory, yes, all four would be relevant. So if you really want to understand your character, you should look at all four of your pillars and then kind of try to synthesize them. But again, in terms of what do they influence? So when I'm talking about the capacity in terms of our personality, the year and the hour. But if you want to look at your constitution, your somewhat more embodied sense of how these influences are manifesting in you, the month and the day would be a little bit more significant. And those two, of course, relate, but year and the hour, for me at least, are the primary ones. So then you, in that synthesis, looking at any individual, you would get, rabbity snake, horsey monkey, whatever. So when interpreting then how a year is going to go for you and thinking about it, then you have to relate both of those images. Sometimes there's a mismatch. So maybe the year is auspicious for you for your year, but then your hour might be mismatched or something like that. But
then you got some work to do in this life.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I wanted to find out my hour, because I want to know what kind of rooster I am. I got a bad feeling I'm a monkey rooster. I don't know.
Well, the 12 hours are pretty easy. To get the elements, you'd probably have to look it up in a calendar. But so the 12 hours are standardized. So I can at least tell you the animal.
8 o'clock in the morning.
Daylight savings?
I don't think so.
So 7 to 9 is dragon hour.
Ooh, I'm a dragony rooster.
Yeah, like me. So I was born 8:47 a.m.
Dragony rooster. Ugh.
Yeah.
God, no wonder I'm impossible to live with.
Yeah. There you go. That's a powerful combo, yeah. That's a good match. So that's considered to be the rooster was always a symbol of the empress, and the dragon is a symbol of the emperor. So that's considered to be a royal pair. A definition of regal, those two together. So,
well, if I was a poker player, that might be helpful. I'm an acupuncturist. We'll see how that plays out. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to be playful and gentle and look at that. Let's turn toward how each of the different, first of all, thank you, because now we have a way of looking at not just what kind of critter we are, but like what kind of critter we are.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I appreciate that. Let's turn toward what kind of critter we are and the influences of the year. So who should we start with? I guess we start with the rat. The rat's the beginning, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so classically, traditionally, it's always start with the rat. And even though the rat is not the first animal, the tiger is actually the first animal, or the first moon, I should say. So the tiger, again, is the symbol of spring. It's a spring energy and the first moon. But for some reason, the rat became the first.
Because the rat is sneaky.
Yes, that's the story, is that in the race of the 12 animals, there is to see who would be first. Slow and steady was going to win the race. Ox was first in line. Every other animal got distracted. Ox just kept plowing forward, and he was eventually going to win the race. But the sneaky rat snuck on top of the ox's head and jumped off his nose at the last minute to be first. Because the rat is resourceful and has that kind of intelligence.
Yes, the rat is an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Anyways, so it's also important to look at the elemental relationship as well. So you have to consider when you're looking at your animal in relation to the year, of course, are you a water, wood, metal, fire, or earth sign? And then think about that relationship, and that's very simple. But in general, water signs, so if you're a water rat, you're in line with the energy of the year. It kind of matches. So the kind of capacity to flow and adapt is a little bit easier. Wood, by nature, this is child of water, so therefore you are if you're a wood sign, then you are more greatly empowered by the energy of the year. The metal sign, this is the mother of water, so it's upholding relationship, but it could be draining in the sense that you are upholding the dynamic of the year, and it can be kind of pulling from you. And fire, obviously, is extinguished by water, so it could be a kind of stifling year in that sense of
rough year for the fire folk.
Yeah, it's not so easy but this could be a good thing because the kind of intensity of fire is kind of hard to manage sometimes, and it's good for fire folk to calm down a little and rest from time to time. So it's actually good in that sense if you can go with it. And then same with earth. Again, that's the controlling factor, but it's the other way around, where earth, because we say, controls water, of course. So you are kind of able to contain the chaos, basically. So earth contains water like a vessel. So this is containing energy, but contrasting. And when you get earth and water together in excess, we get muddy and a bit stuck sometimes. But so yeah, that's the general elemental kind of overview.
And that would be true for all the different animals.
Yeah.
We look at it across the cycles of creation and control. And, we're acupuncturists, so we already have a pretty good sense of what that might mean for us.
Yep.
Or our patients, for that matter.
Yep. And certainly something to consider for ourselves and for others in terms of why we struggle and why somebody else might be struggling, or
maybe even why we're flourishing.
Yes, why things are much easier.
It's always so interesting because in any situation, through any kind of trouble, there's always those people that they don't just do okay, they thrive.
For sure.
And I suspect part of that has to do with those outer influences and those inner resources that someone has. Like you were saying earlier, what Ming used to say about how capacity meets opportunity.
Yeah. When those are matched, then we thrive. That's basically the definition of flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
When you actually have all the opportunities to demonstrate your character and your capacity. And then that's the definition of frustration as well, is when you don't. If you have a lot to offer the world, a lot to share, and nobody to share it with, or nothing, no place to do it, or no support to do it, or so on. So, and we're all lopsided in that sense. So there's always places in which we have opportunities and places which we do not. And few people are just flourish everywhere. So often we see people who flourish in one area of life but struggle in another. And that's, again, what astrology looks at in terms of like looking at the 12 houses, for example, is to see how we're all kind of lopsided. And and ideally where we have to work. If we don't have resources, we don't have good opportunities somewhere, maybe it's a good idea to divert our attention elsewhere, or maybe we have to work to make connections and find resources that are not available to us. But also, of course, how that happens is in the form of character. So character determines a lot how we relate to opportunity. So again, like what one person might consider an opportunity, another person might consider a nightmare. Like if you all of a sudden were promoted to being a manager and a rabbit, and now all of a sudden you have to have all this responsibility, you have to meet with people all the time, you have to have all these decisions placed on your shoulders, it might be very stressful.
Hopefully you're a dragony rabbit.
Yeah. But that's a good example, actually. So there, you might have another, even if you were a rabbit, maybe if you were born in the hour of the dragon, then you might be able to rise to that opportunity and become a really good leader. So that would be a great example of how a great leader could actually be made, because ideally a leader should have heart, and rabbits have a lot of heart. So do dragons, of course, but the rabbit by nature hides their heart. They're shy and they keep it very protected. So hard to be, in the spotlight. But if they have an influence of the dragon, then they can be in the spotlight and have heart at the same time, and that could be a very powerful display.
Yeah, an opportunity to develop different parts of ourselves that bring more balance to who we are and brings out hidden, latent capacities. So I know we could get like into the wheels and wheels and wheels here.
Yeah.
That's easy to do. Let's try to go through the critters, though.
So starting with the rat, yeah.
Yeah, with just that yearly influence and the second part of this year coming up.
So the rat by nature is the smallest of the animals, and they have this kind of resourcefulness. If the virtue of the small is what I called it when I wrote the blog on the rat year, the virtue of the small. There's that book, The Dove Piglet.
Great book.
Yeah, that's a great book for the kind of rat energy. And rats by nature are kind of, so in their, by nature, yang water, so they kind of match really well with the year because it's a yang water year. The basic nature of all rats is yang water. And that's kind of like, there's a saying, the rats are the first to abandon a sinking ship. So rats have this capacity to kind of see danger coming, but also can be a bit paranoid because they're about resources. If you're small, you have to work together with others and band together in order to do things. And rats, when the animal, gather together in huge groups. And then when they do that, they can gnaw away the foundation of a whole building and take it apart. So the nature of the tiger is a bit intense. It's a bit much for the rat. It's a kind of the drama, has the capacity to send the rat into a kind of paranoid, ship is sinking panic mentality. rats could kind of go off the rails and start hoarding for the apocalypse, especially when this kind of situation, say like economically, like we have now. So that's one of the most important things of the rat this year is a kind of mental health check, and to notice this pattern of going into doomsaying or going into the darkness. So avoiding isolation and making sure to do their best to connect with other people. Because rats by nature are community oriented, and they bring people together, but out of necessity and out of resource and out of a kind of deep sense of and need. So there's some animals that are community oriented out of more of a connection. For rats, it's like, it's essential. It's for survival. It's a kind of survival. It's like we actually really do need each other.
You don't see lone rats too often.
No, it'd be definitely a kind of danger. But they very detail oriented, of course. This is the nature of the rat. It's a zoomed in, focused look at things, and it's a kind of precise energy. So there's a kind of need for that in a year where there's potentially a lot of drama and a lot of chaos.
Now, what about this yin, this Dre yin side of it? We're coming into the yin side of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this Dre yin influence, I get it that we've got the tiger and that stirs the rat up in a certain way, but let's just focus it down to this latter part of the year with this Dre yin energy coming in. And then we'll just take that through all the different animals.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's saying about the mental health part, the nature of the rat to go kind of paranoid. And that's the internal wind. So making sure to check and to do the self-care necessary by, again, connecting with people and having community and having support and bringing people together. So like it's the first half of the year has this capacity to kind of to scatter people, push people into a kind of individualistic mode. If the second half of the year is a kind of has all this wind influence, then making sure that wind is contained. That's I guess would be the most important thing.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi, and that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
So be careful with your inner ruminations is what I'm hearing.
Yes, and tending to relationship, I suppose.
That definitely helps with inner ruminations, because tending to relationship will tend to keep you connected to the world and not just lost in your own dark forest of your mind.
Yes.
Okay.
And to offer as well that kind of resourcefulness to other people, because we need that kind of a capacity to not overlook the details.
And that's the rat's job. All right. What about the ox?
Ox. By nature, very sturdy, very strong, very containing energy, and probably won't be too disrupted by this year. There's a strength to both the tiger and the ox. But the ox is the definition of yin strength, which is by its sheer size, it just moves and it plows the earth. So oxes have this capacity to carry other people and often have a lot of responsibility put on them, and usually they put it on themselves and take it on.
So oxes may feel more responsibility for others in this latter part of the year with this Dre yin influence.
Yeah, and as it's similar to the rat in terms of I think all of them are going to have a degree of mental health checking in, but in different ways. The kind of gloominess, the darkness, I think, that's available, overall in the water years, probably more so when we get into the yin water. But the ox by nature can be kind of it's the yin earth energy is very
Could stagnate a bit.
stagnating. Yeah, that's probably the right word. So in a way, it could be a kind of the wind.
The wind could keep things moving a little bit. It might not be bad to be an ox right about now.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think because oxes are just going to plow forward. They're just going to do their thing. They're very routine. They're going to keep working. They're always going to be busy. And as the year starts to internalize, as the internal wind starts to kick up in that internal mode, actually could be enlivening for that inner earth element. And so the wood controlling earth is actually a little lightening. It keeps it from getting stagnant and aerates it.
All right. Oxes might have a next good 6 months.
Yeah, I think just keeping the routine.
They're good at that. That's what they do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's what they're really good at it. Well, let's talk about tigers.
Yes. So tiger.
Our friend the tiger.
Yeah. So, I said I'm a tiger. And if your second half of the year is very much the kind of, we'll see which stripe comes forward. So how you've kind of squared with the stripiness has a lot to do with how the year goes for tigers. And that's that kind of alternating quality. So it's overall an extraordinarily important year for self-reflection for tigers. And that second half of the year, the yin half of the year, the capacity for rest, the need for rest. So the first half of the year likely much more active, and the second half of the year going internal and hiding in the cave, which is important, but also trying not to do it too much to the point where you get isolated or depressed or anything like that. So there's probably a good idea for tigers to get out of their shell a little bit and try to be more social in the second half of the year. And hopefully the first half of the year sets that up, building relationships and also just doing a lot of the hard work. And it's kind of the year for tigers to bring forward all their kind of best qualities and also to watch out for all their darkest qualities to come forward as well. So that kind of reflection will be very important.
So tigers, take a little bit of a vacation. Go easy on yourself, but not too easy.
Yep. The dark and the light both come forward very strongly. So like I said, all your best qualities, but also all the darkest qualities come out, and to be able to notice that, and the potential for the darker qualities to happen in the yin half of the year. So tigers have an inner conflict. Every time they rest, they want to be in action, and every time they're in action, they want to rest. So it's kind of like just have to accept and embrace solitude when it happens, and to go full forward and just fully embrace the activity. That's the tiger way.
Okay.
For rabbits, the similar, perhaps, like I mentioned before, rabbits are all about the heart and that kind of inner deep feeling quality. And there's a kind of nesting instinct, perhaps, again, the alternating quality of the year, the second half of the year. Hopefully the first half of the year, my advice would have been definitely to prepare for unevenness and unpredictability, and getting things like finances, jobs, relationships all very strongly in order. So then the second half of the year, everything can be kind of stable, because without that, the capacity for the year to become very unstable. And if those things aren't in order, then the second half of the year will probably be a bit unnerving. So it's very important to secure all of the things that give the rabbit the power. When the rabbit has support, when they have their home base, when they have their finances, when they have all those things secure, then they become the dragon. That's they become very, very powerful, So
okay, that's interesting. The rabbit becomes the dragon. So having your hearth and home in good order is really important right now.
Very much so, yeah. And I would say dragons. Ming always said he would wash his hands of dragons. There's nothing you can really say to them. They're just going to do whatever they want. And I would say it's probably the case. But, just the dragon, without self-reflection, without humility, and without a sense of staying connected to the earthly realm, just goes off the rails. it's too visionary, it's too big of an energy, and so staying connected to the earth. The tiger is a kind of the terrestrial dragon. It's considered to be that's why they're always depicted fighting over the ring of power in Chinese iconography. They're very similar in that sense, and the connect, staying grounded and staying on earth, being a little bit humble and avoiding the aloof nature. Dragons can just be off doing their own thing and seem very aloof to others and self-centered in that sense. So the second half of the year, internalizing and the capacity for solitude don't really mix well, sometimes with the dragon's outward moving.
So dragons might be a little edgy in this second part of the year. They don't like that closed Drayan darkwood energy. That it's a little bit counter to their nature. So they might be a little fussy and be on guard for that. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so, yeah. I think that embrace that and to say it's okay, to rest from time to time. And that's probably maybe something to say to everybody, and maybe imperative more than others. But dragon can be a little bit dramatic as well if things are not kind of going their way. So cool it on the drama.
Cool it on the drama. All right, dragons, cool it.
Making mountains out of molehills.
Okay.
So where snakes, very similar also, their nature is like the tiger, is stillness and action. But their side of stillness is, so a snake can lie still for hours. They can a long time, and then all of a sudden strike very quickly, and that's how they hunt. They become a tree root or something. And the dark half of the year, that kind of stillness side of the tiger, will empower that a lot. Probably very natural for snakes to want to go into the solitude. So I'd say that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So embrace the spiritual side of it. There's a lot of available spiritually in this year. Many of the themes of the year that I wrote about in the blog, which are things like death and dying and the dream world. These are very big and empowered. And the snake probably has the greatest capacity to kind of go into these things and to really contemplate them fruitfully. So I'd say, this is the capacity for spiritual reflection. And again, this probably applies to everybody to some degree, but maybe snakes just have that ability to go into it. It's just watching out for the kind of nihilism and depression and laziness and inaction and things like that can be unhealthy, but to go into the kind of spiritual depths.
So a unique opportunity for the snake.
Yeah.
Okay.
For horse, right now we're in the horse month, and this is a kind of, the height of summer. The horse is the galloping, running fire energy. I'd say this is probably the best year for horses overall in general. This is the kind of push of yang that horses have been, I think, looking for a while. The second half of the year is hard to say because horses, I think, are going to want to just keep running, like a galloping, just wild, free energy to the horse that I think really wants to go just crazy this year. And the danger is, of course, jumping over your own experience. You take leaps of faith. This is kind of the year to take leaps of faith, to just do something, to just push forward, to just do the thing you've always wanted to do. So, I think horses could just keep that going, basically. The danger, though, of course, in the second half is just going overboard with it, doing too much. You can't take that many leaps of faith. You can't take that many brave, daring moves forward.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to relax a bit.
So would it be fair to say that the horses, with all their wild, creative, galloping energy, would do well to dial it back to a trot and consolidate some of the experience and some of the movement that they've had in the first part of the year?
Yeah, especially if they've done that movement, to recognize and have that reflection, to hold it back and to kind of slow down a bit, to say, all right, what have I accomplished so far, and how do I refine this and turn it into so the horse has that ability to train like the equestrian, side, and basically to focus and more further refine what they've put into action, what they've moved forward.
It's a great word, refine. Take an opportunity to refine what you got.
Yeah. I think there's goats, rabbits, and pigs. This is the social trine. And we really need these people, and people who have this capacity. People are social in different ways and bring people together socially in different ways and have different things to offer. But we need real community. Communities have been absolutely gutted by the past few years, I think, and people are struggling to find community all over the place. And the goat is the herd animal.
Mm-hmm.
And in this year, which is hypes up this kind of individualism and personal sense of potentially struggle and isolation and frustration. So I think goats just like the more you can bring people together in the darkness, there's, I would say, please, we need it. And again, this goes to everybody to some degree or another, but it's natural to you and you have that capacity. The egalitarian nature of the goat, is, I think, really, really needed in this second half, because I think there's a loneliness and a isolation that a lot of people are feeling. And the goat by nature just feels that natural way that everybody is connected and how everything is interconnected. And so bringing that out, sharing that, pointing it out to people, and being a bridge, uplift other people, and so on. That's what I would say for the goat in principle, for sure.
Goats have an important role right now.
Yeah. Now, the monkey is the opposite of the tiger, and monkeys, I'm hoping, all the monkeys out there, the year is not being too rough on you. And the first half of the year is a little bit more that, like, maybe the tiger out the gate hunting, and the monkey is like trying to just escape. That's the nature of the monkey, is a kind of playful energy of trying to pull the rug out from under things, run down the tree, grab the tiger by the tail, and run back up the tree to escape danger. This does not go as well in the tiger year.
Tiger's more likely to catch you. Monkeys don't pull the tiger's tail.
Yeah.
We know you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole year for monkeys is kind of like a lay low, as well as just to rein back and to look in the mirror. So the opposite energy is that of a mirror. Mirrors can be uncomfortable to look at. If your opposite tells you the most about you spiritually, so monkeys probably come up against a lot of difficulty, and it might be a powerful mirror, basically. To eat bitter is a kind of Chinese term, right? A number of signs. It's a kind of eat bitter year, and monkeys for sure. So monkey kind of chaotic energy, and don't tend to do good in stillness. They like to be active, monkey mind, so.
Right. We're looking at some Yin energy here. So this is a good opportunity for the monkeys to sit, look at that mirror, as uncomfortable as it is. Again, earlier we're talking about capacities and opportunities.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to take a look at the thing you don't really want to look at, which none of us really enjoy, but it can be really helpful for each of us. So monkeys have a unique opportunity here for some growth.
Yeah, I think smooth out the wind.
Smooth out the wind.
The wind energy is very strong in the monkey. It's yang metal, though. It's internalized. It's the very active imagination. And so there's just that watching out for the danger of where the imagination can go if it's kind of not given that mirror. The imagination can kind of run wild. But it's tough for monkeys. But yeah, rest. Don't swing to the next branch. Don't look for the next thing. Just
chill. Monkeys, chill.
Yeah, you've seen the images of the water monkey in Japan just chilling in the bath. That's the monkey. All monkeys should watch that and just be like, all right, that's
the monkey for the second part of the year. Okay. How about as roosters?
Yeah, it's a classic Gong Fu pair. The roosters, the crane, very kind of seem to balance the heavy paw of the tiger, right? So the combination of strength and precision together, very powerful combo. I think the capacity for a kind of productivity, like you said, the need for that rest, you're feeling it already. But if you can take that, the capacity, so the precision and the focus of the rooster and the exactness, if it is focused and it is grounded, then the productivity is pretty much off the charts, but not necessarily outwardly, but like inwardly and practically in terms of planning and in terms of organizing, getting things in order, and so on. So I'd say the meditative exactness can have a very strong effect of putting all the channels in order.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I've experienced a tremendous burst of energy in this first part of the year. I've naturally moved into this more yin piece. I've got it all planned. It's on the calendar. It's happening. So taking that further, and often if you cultivate some stillness, there's a lot that can come out of it. You just have to sit and wait and let it ripen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That sounds like good advice for the rooster. What about the dogs?
Dogs, part of it. So the horse, dog, and tiger are a trine of compatibility. They're seen to be good buddies. The dog all about loyalty, right? So the tendency, though, of the dog to be pushed this year into its kind of lone wolf nature is a little bit higher. The first half of the year could have been disrupting towards those personal alliances, and I've seen it in a couple of dogs as well. Paying attention to wake up, I think, to the need to really solidify the most important intimate relationships. So if it means, taking time off work or cutting back hours or whatever, I think the heart connection, the dog, and of course the pericardium. And so if the first half of the year has really just been rough, then the second half, the way a dog recharges is through those really, really deep personal connections. And some dogs find that in solitude. So if that means taking the time for yourself as well, but making sure that those heart connections are very well tended to, basically, I would say is important. And again, like I said, some of these true for everybody to some degree, but if the pericardium connections, if that is broken or traumatized or anything like that, the dog is very unhappy, but with it, they flourish. And the yin half of the year, of course, the time to internalize and to be with other people more as it gets darker and gets colder and so on. And, the dog should also bring forward its creative side. So dogs there's a strange nature that of dogs having a very unique and very personal creative sense that's empowered this year. And this is, I think, one of the most creative years available for everybody. There's in terms of artistic creativity, but I would encourage dogs to let their kind of unique personal sense of self out a little bit more than usual.
All right. Final but not least character.
Yeah, of course, pigs. Ming was a pig, and pig and tiger are a special Confucian pair. They are pig is considered to be the kind of best support for the tiger energy, because tigers need a lot of help, and pigs by nature are the most generous, the most kind of loving and accepting of people, but also have a very strong wrathful side. They are protectors. It's the mama bear energy, but also the kind of energy of relaxation, enjoyment, and the tiger has this quality. One side of the cat and one side of the feline energy is very much a kind of like lazy, napping, snacking kind of energy, and the pig is very much like this kind of all the time. That's all they would really, I think, like to do. And the second half of the year is, bringing out the lazy cat. So one, helping other people to enjoy life. So this is something we forget in a year as intense as this tiger year. The opportunity to forget enjoying your lunch, or to forget to take a nap, or to forget all these things is very easy to do. So the pig is definitely, I'd say bring it out and just go strong with it. The enjoyment and the relaxation and the helping of other people to enjoy and to really indulge in their senses, their sensory experience of life is so rich. And when we're so stuck in our minds all the time, when we're so stuck in our ambitions and constantly pushing forward all the time, we forget, how amazing, a strawberry can taste or something like that. So that's the pig.
So it sounds to me like for the pigs, all us other animals would benefit from having some pig friends to hang with.
Yes, yeah, pig should have a party going.
Yeah, that'll help us to enjoy the moment. Being Yin, though, for pigs, maybe they need to be a little bit on guard against self-indulgence.
Yeah, that's always true for pigs for sure. And the tendency to go a little bit overboard, which is also, why the wind, just keep things moving, keep things circulating so they don't get stagnant, is probably good.
So that could be really helpful for the pigs. They won't get too stagnated.
Yeah, similar to the ox, I think, in that sense. The wallowing, just watch out to not wallow too much in the
in the dark forest. Yeah. All right. Good thing we got some breeze there. Okay. Well, holy smokes. It's always fun sitting down and talking with you about this stuff. And again, I so appreciate your sensibility and your capacity to share with us how to play with this stuff symbolically, how to explore it and use it not as something to nail down, but as something to open up and inquire with.
Yes, I hope people can. If there's one, message that I would have is, and this goes for everything in the Chinese tradition, is to play with symbols. Really, is to learn each symbol. So, like trying to give a little bit of tastes here, but we get this huge vocabulary of symbols, and to learn them as much as you can, and to really go in depth into the richness of each symbol, and then to just play with them in life. And that would be my hope for everybody studying the Chinese tradition and using Chinese astrology to inform Chinese medicine and so on. Don't try to nail things down. Don't try to get this mechanical. Just play and be loose and gentle. The light touch of associative thinking is, I think, the way to wisdom. Especially with something like Chinese medicine, because after doing this, for a year now, I realize this is not precise. It is a playful act. To some degree, if you try to force it to fit into systems, you're doing a disservice to people, because nobody fits into a box.
No, we don't. This is anything that Chinese medicine has taught me. You can't put people in boxes. I mean, we kind of use boxes as a way of learning to view the world through the idea of Chinese medicine, but then the lines disappear as you begin to practice.
Yeah, the boxes are symbols too, like a pattern in Chinese medicine, like spleen qi deficiency. That's just a symbol as well. It's also a playful thing. And if you know what the spleen is, what all these different factors are, then you can look at how it might be manifesting for somebody. And it just gives you an avenue to approach things as well, and to understand people and to understand our own experience. Again, it's a reflective, contemplative act that should enrich our lives, and it should just make things more interesting, more fun to think what is this thing that we are in, this flow of time, this flow of experience. And such a rich tradition of and symbols are just fun
and helpful navigation marks
for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is a good place to put a pin in it for today. Thank you so much for your time, and maybe we'll talk again around the beginning of the new year.
Yeah, well, next year of the rabbit, I'll do my best to continue my tradition of commenting, and happy to come back and talk about it again.
Well, I am not alone in expressing appreciation for the work you do. Thank you so much, Gregory. Talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I Ching stems and branches the way the Chinese calendar charts the seasons, the tensegrity of the 5 phases, the influence of the 6 climatic qi. All of this might be helpful to us in our clinical work. It's helpful, not because it tells us what to do or what points to use, but that we might get a glimpse of where somebody is at and how they got there. And that just might be what's needed to guide us in helping people who seek out the medicine that we have to offer. There is no stopping the wheels and cycles of change, but as we think about our work with acupuncture, how we are looking to aid the flow of qi so it moves smoothly, or remove blockages and counterflows so as to set things in the correct direction, it seems to me that our job is less about fixing things like a handyman and more like being a trusty navigator who helps the pilot to steer a reliable course through uncertain waters. I hope that you are enjoying midsummer. I'm going to be taking a break for the next month and enjoy a bit of yin quiet here in the yang of the year. But do be sure to tune in here on the podcast, because I've got some summer reruns that you probably haven't heard. These are some of my favorite conversations from the Everyday Acupuncture podcast, which in essence was the precursor to Qiological. Please enjoy these conversations, and then in August, we'll be back with a special series on bodywork and East Asian medicine. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.